Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 120. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Sampson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room buildouts from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Sampson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Sampson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out SampsonEquipment.com to see how Sampson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge since 2012. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_GAME to save on your next order. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Founded in 1995, Sport Kilt is the very first company to begin making casual kilts in the USA. Taking the traditional kilt concept, they crafted a casual kilt using modern materials that is perfect for Highland athletes and casual kilt aficionados alike. Whether it's competing in Highland Games, connecting with your heritage at a family gathering or wedding, or just casually spending some time around the house or wanting to stand out from the crowd, Sport kilts are made for everyone and for every occasion. Make the ultimate Keltimic statement by checking out the full selection of kilts and stylish kilt accessories at sportkilt.com, and be sure to use our promo code TSG to save at checkout. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Lilly Bernardi. Lilly is an assistant strength conditioning coach at Hofstra University. She works with the Pride's women's soccer, baseball, women's lacrosse, men's golf, track and field, and cross-country teams, in addition to being the internship program coordinator for the Hofstra Strength Conditioning Department. She rejoined the Hofstra staff in 2022 as a full-time coach and previously serving as a graduate assistant from 2020 to 2021, as well as a volunteer coach. Between her stints at Hofstra, she was an assistant coach on the strength conditioning staff at Fordham University for 1 season. She also worked as a senior intern at Lawrenceville School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey in 2019 before shifting to collegiate coaching. Bernardi was a 4-year member of the TCNJ women's lacrosse team from 2016 to 2020, where she was a 3-year starter for the Lions and a key member of 2 Final Four teams. Since playing days, she continues to stay active, training during the collegiate season, as well as competing in powerlifting. I'm excited to have her on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Lilly Bernardi. What's going on, everybody? Today we have Coach Lilly Bernardi on the show. How you doing today, Coach?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. It's as the time we're recording this, we're in a little bit of lull of summer. So excited to get you on and kind of to the relaxing point a little bit more of the season. We got to hang out a little bit at the CSCCA this year and kind of get introduced to each other. So I'm excited to kind of dive a little bit deeper today and get to know you and show you with the audience a little bit more. So appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Hey, so let's hop right into it. Like, how'd you first get started in the strength game, lifting, training? I know you played lacrosse at one of our D3 kind of little women's lacrosse rivals over at TCNJ, and then now kind of getting involved more so competing in powerlifting. Take us through kind of like that whole origin story a little bit.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I played lacrosse at TCNJ for my collegiate career. Prior to that, I played basketball and lacrosse in high school. And I would say in high school, I just was faster and more athletic. And I never really noticed or understood the value in putting in extra work outside of just your skill work. So, I would practice outside and shoot in the driveway, or I would go outside and have a catch on the wall. But it was really once I decided to play lacrosse at TCNJ that I wanted to really see how I could further, enhance my athletic skills and abilities and do more outside of just practice on a daily basis. So, my coach at TCNJ, her name is Sharon Fluger, and the last time I checked, she is still to date the winningest coach in all of NCAA women's lacrosse. So, as you can imagine, stepping into her office with 14 national championship trophies and all of her accolades was overwhelming, but also really cool for me. I really stepped in there and decided I didn't want to just go there and play lacrosse. Like, I wanted to go there and play lacrosse. I wanted to be a leader on the team. I wanted to be a contributor. So it was really then at that point in high school, I believe I was a senior when I decided to play there, that I just started lifting a little bit. I got a gym membership, would do some running on my own. Granted, I can't speak towards the, reliability of any of the resources that I was using at the time, but I just wanted to get more involved any way that I could. And once I stepped foot into an actual collegiate strength and conditioning room and a weight room, I fell in love with it. And, since my college career, I have dabbled in a few powerlifting competitions here and there. I'd say bench squat, deadlift, that's kind of my bread and butter. That's, what I'm strongest in and love to do. So I had a former boss of mine just recommend that I try it out and stay competitive. So I've done a few and hope to do some more in the future.
That's awesome. That's a great thing. I think DJ kind of said the same thing too. Coach Pendergast was like kind of pushing everybody towards it. And I know you guys kind of train together and get at least maybe one in a semester, or one in a year, which is still a big accomplishment when people start looking at the collegiate schedule. It's kind of difficult when you're doing it. Like, luckily enough, at least which bench squats to deadlift. So if you're at a good peak in time, like as long as you could find that date and it kind of coincides, if you got to make a weight cut or anything like that, like you get to at least get that feeling, those butterflies again, to kind of step on the platform and compete in a little bit of different setting than like what it was to play games in the spring for lacrosse. But it's still a cool feat in itself. So, kind of touching on it, like we talked about it before we got recording, just because we both came through D3 like programs and kind of prolific ones in a sense where they're always like kind of perennially on the cusp of NCAA championships, or at least in the playoffs, and trying to push for like further accolades. You talked about your coach a little bit. Like, I know Coach Nestor, like the women's lacrosse coach at Salisbury, is the same way, like just a long lineage of success and everything. But what to you, like, what's the difference in like some of those places? Because like there's a kind of grittiness and like a work ethic, and like just inherent character traits at some of those D3 schools that mentality carries over to like the success on the field. And you see it in those consistent programs that are always in there. Like, what were you able to kind of take from that? And then what do you think kind of stands apart from those programs that now you can kind of use when you come to Hofstra and you start working as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge thing in that program, my coach, she has been there for 30 plus years. Our assistant coach was a former athlete of hers, and so were the other assistants on our staff. So even just the coaching staff in itself is just a lineage of athletes who have played for her and now coach alongside her. And I think the thing about Division 3 is, you know, there's no scholarships involved. You are there solely for the love of the game, and they push you hard. The teams that, they are going for national championships year in and year out. If we lost a conference tournament, fortunately we didn't in my time there, but that would be an absolute shock of a year to us. That would be a horrible year for TCNJ lacrosse if they ever were to lose the NJAC tournament. So I think the program has its standards. And if you're not up to those standards, you're there voluntarily. You don't have to be there. And I think just year in and year out, we had just the craziest things that were always passed down. You have a meeting with the seniors in the beginning of the year and you talk a little bit about coach and, hey, like your do's and don'ts at practice. She's kind of, I don't want to say like old school, but big on respect. And I think it's something that carries over into just everywhere in life and coaching. We couldn't use the word what. So if she's screaming at you from across the field, you could do this, you can, say, sorry, coach, I couldn't hear you, but you could not use the word what. Like it was just a thing on the team, but everyone kind of passes down that information. And it's just like a funny thing to think about back in the program. There's these pants called the playoff pants. I was just there this past weekend, and I think they're from, I don't know, somewhere in the 90s, 80s maybe, but they have been passed down. One senior every single year will wear the random purple pants to practice one day, and it's just a tradition in the team. So I just think at that level, your love for the game, although, it's not always easy at times, is what at the end of the day you're there for. And I think we kind of know the standard, and then it's on us to uphold that standard.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing when you think about it too, because like for people that don't know, for Division 3, like when you get to the off season, it's pretty much hands off until you get that really small chunk of time where it's just like a quick fall ball all thrown together fast. And like if you're a spring sport like lacrosse, you're probably playing at that point in time, like they're making like a third of cuts, like within like that couple few days, because people come and try out and they want to play. And they really, a lot of them don't realize that like Division 3 athletics is still very competitive. And we used to have a bunch of like D1 bounce backs that either didn't want to play at that level anymore, couldn't make it academically, just wanted a different thing, or for whatever reason, just kind of wanted to get out of it and still play at a competitive side. But there's so many people going out that just don't understand like
Right.
the level of the commitment and everything. And like you said, you really kind of get the keys to the kingdom, and you're running everything on your own in the off season. And then the coaches finally get you like right when preseason starts, and it's wherever you're coming in is where they have you for the season. But like if you have that tradition and you have like all the seniors kind of leading the ship and leading the charge and setting the standard, then you're in a much better position to kind of be successful for sure.
And I think it was even more so interesting in our off season at TCNJ because our head coach, she's also the head coach for the field hockey program there. So when you are in your off season, our acting head coach during the fall or, that fall season is the assistant coach, which I think is also great because, we get to see our assistant coach in that head coaching role. But we don't really see our head coach until actually day one of the spring. Maybe she pops in and out, but those were early morning practices. And then whatever team is in season, they practice 2 to 5 pretty much every day. So we didn't really get to see her until we were in our spring season.
Yeah, I always forget that. Like, I don't know what the rules are necessarily now. I know it's kind of changed, but I thought like Division 3, you had to have 2 programs. So Like I remember our offensive coordinator at Salisbury was also the head baseball coach.
Mm.
And at one point in time, like Nestor, like women's lacrosse coach, was also the women's soccer coach. And there was like so much crossover. It was either that or I think, or if you were not a head coach or you were a head coach, I can't remember, you still had to teach like a class if you didn't have two teams. So it makes it super interesting that like, hey, you don't really have access like Division I players do all the time, where hey, you can kind of pop in whenever because that's their kind of sole job if they're a coach isn't on the road recruiting. I think you mentioned one thing too that I think is unique to most Division III schools, it seems like, or at least the ones that like we kind of know about that are super successful. And I know there's outliers you can find in Division I sports too, but it's like the lineage, like that longevity and consistency that you get from some of these coaches that are like implanted there. Like Coach Berkman at Salisbury has been there like 25 plus years. Like all his sons have played there for the most part. Like softball coach that like was there, like all those coaches, like when I was in school there, are for the most part are still there. So you do get to build like that, be a part of that history and tradition because it's well established and you come into it and it like you said, the seniors kind of pass it down because it's been passed down 10, 15, 20 years before them as well. So you get to they're like this actually means something. This is a big deal if you're on this program.
Yeah, definitely. Our head coach, her daughter was a freshman my senior year, and it was like full circle. I was there about 2 weeks ago, and it was her senior day, and it's just crazy to think about. But yeah, it's a family school. A lot of people go there, and the lineage is it's just awesome to see. It's a well-developed culture. You know what you're getting when you're going there, and it's consistent year to year.
Well, now kind of being on the flip side of it, like where you're working on like developing like a culture within the weight room or kind of try to carry out what your sports coaches, like those head coaches are trying to do with the programs now at Hofstra. Like, how do you kind of on the flip side of that, like not being on the field, try to carry out that tradition and build it like within the weight room? Like what is too much and like what is like enough to make sure that like you're echoing what the coach is doing and making sure that the weight room is actually carrying the same message that your coaches want to do.
Hmm. I think a lot of things go into that. So one, as a staff, strength conditioning wise, we have our standards, we have our expectations and kind of, what we expect from teams, but there's also the conversations that we have with our sport coaches. And I don't necessarily change team by team. Like I am who I am. I have my philosophies. I have what I believe in, but also I have conversations with my coaches to get everyone on the same page. I look at it as a collaborative effort. End of the day, we are the support staff and the head coaches, I want to meet the goals that they have for their program. I want to see how I can assist them in that. So whether it's just asking them questions like, where do you think we lack? What do you think we need to improve on? For instance, this past year, women's lacrosse, we wanted to put a huge priority on speed and agility. I was able to get the girls out on the field 3 days a week in the off season. It was awesome, but to really have those goals and talk to each other and identify areas of weakness or strengths and actually come up with a plan to attack it. I think that um that's huge. And just making sure that your message is consistent. So, whether if the team is out on the field and they're expected to match tops, bottoms, everything, then I'm going to expect the same in the weight room. I don't want a coach coming and asking me, well, why did you kick so and so out of the weight room? And I was like, oh, well, they weren't wearing the same shirt as the rest of the team. But if that's not one of their rules or, one part of their culture, the coach is going to be like, what are you talking about? So just making sure that the message is consistent and we're aligned and can we meet somewhere in the middle? Can we collaborate on this? Because end of the day, I think both of our jobs is to get the team and each individual athlete performing at their best and just figuring out how we're going to do that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, collaborative is a huge word when it comes to it. And I think I seem to see like a lot of younger coaches that are kind of get into it, like, and I mean, even some older coaches are the same way too. Like we're a support staff, but at the end of the day, we can still, like within the department, within the weight room, still have kind of our own standards and expectations. And like if you want your athletes to come in, like you said, and be dressed a certain way, if that's not what the coach has on the field, you can still have those rules, but you just need to make sure that they're communicated with the coaching staff and they're like, they might not necessarily agree on it, but like at the end of the day, it's kind of our domain and we're working with their athletes. Like you can collaborate and you can kind of meet in the middle at some point, but if there's something that a department's doing or something that a program as a sport is doing too, like you can still kind of have your own identity and still make sure that you're finding ways to meet in the middle and come to some sort of conclusion. But yeah, if you're not telling your sport coaches like, hey, if they're not like tucking their shirt in, if their shoes aren't tied when they come in, like I'm sending them home. If you don't tell them that before it happens, you're probably gonna you're gonna be in trouble with that because ultimately you're kind of working for them, but you can still set your own. It's a weird gray area, I think. But
Right. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is everyone has their area of expertise, right? So I want to have the conversations with the coaches of what do you want me to work on? That doesn't mean I'm going to go down to each individual exercise. Oh, would you rather me do a lunge or a split squat for this? It's you tell me what you want us to work on, and I'll come up with the plan in order to do so. Same way that I have lacrosse background as an athlete, but I'll never step onto the field and tell the coach what play to run or what defense to play or what they're doing wrong. I think it's just kind of identify the goal and then have the trust and communication with each other in order for each person to do their part in helping us accomplish that.
yeah, I think when you do that too, and you have kind of the coaches buy in and they're able to kind of give you their overarching like goals that they want to see for like for the team to be able to perform wise. Hey, this is the style we kind of want to play, or this is like where we want to be at this point in time during the season. It's up to the strength coaches to kind of figure out the best approach for the team and like with the tools available and the time allotted to get them to that goal. Like how you do it is determined by like the strength staff, like what you're kind of doing and like what the overarching goals are kind of determined by they're driven from the head coach, but they're also like influenced and kind of like we said collaborated with the strength staff because you at some point in time still need to agree upon like what the goals are because if like we said if we're the subject matter expert in kind of like that physical development and like preparation, if a coach is saying something that's like a goal that's so outlandish that you're like, hey, this isn't really gonna this isn't going to yield you the results that you want. Like when it comes to playing, it's our job to kind of like steer them in a slightly different direction. Otherwise, they're going to want strong athletes, and then you're going to have soccer players that look like Lego bricks out there that can't move.
Mhm.
So you kind of you got to weigh it in and give them a little bit of some background to like what's going to happen if we train them a specific way. And if they really want that, then all right, here we go.
Yeah, you get some crazy ideas sometimes, but I think the two questions you just ask, okay, how are we going to do this from a safety perspective? Is this reasonable from a safety perspective? And then, is it reasonable from a performance perspective as well?
Definitely. Hey, so you talked about it too. Like you have women's lacrosse, like you have a lot of experience in that sport. Like, do you feel like it's is it much easier to relate to those lacrosse athletes, even playing like at a different level, but just understanding the sport? And then like in turn, like maybe some of the sports you're less familiar with, like, do you feel like it takes a little bit more time, like energy and like maybe practice like going out to practice a little bit more to kind of build that rapport just because you don't really speak that language or necessarily understand that sport as well.
I would say that in terms of the weight room and how I communicate and build rapport with my athletes, I wouldn't say it differs too much. Now, I think if I'm on the sidelines of a lacrosse game and I'm chatting with some of the girls, or I'm at practice and I know exactly what's going on, I can explain the rules to someone else on staff who doesn't really know them. On the support staff, I would hope that everyone on our lacrosse staff knows them, but maybe that's where I spend a little more time at practice for me to understand the game as I'm watching it. I think the biggest thing for me that I'm fully transparent about with my athletes, and what I hope maybe gets me a little bit of buy-in from them, is I tell them about my collegiate career. I graduated in 2020. I was a COVID senior. I lost that year, never got it back. I could have, but it didn't make sense for me. So, I expect that my athletes are going to come in, and I know it's hard day to day, but my expectation is that take advantage of the time that you have, because you truly don't know when it's gone, whether it's injury, whether it's pandemic, whatever it is. And I just view that as a respect thing for me, because I would trade my whistle for their jersey any day of the week if I could do it one more time. And I try to really get that message across to my athletes, just because if I see them slacking, I take it personally. So that's something that I would say in terms of speaking with my athletes, relating to them, giving them some insight to who I am and my athletic background. Yeah, it was in lacrosse, but I'd say I do have to put in a little more work for some of those sports that are unfamiliar to me, maybe more behind the scenes, doing specific clinics or reading books on those sports. I had some sports that I've never really seen before prior to working with them: squash, rowing. I did a lot of reading and looking at research and talking to the athletic trainers about common injuries, just to educate myself better, to give me the means to come up with a good program and be well prepared for them. Whereas lacrosse, I know how that feels, but I'd say more of the work is done behind the scenes, because I try to show up for my athletes as much as I can and as much as my schedule allows outside of the weight room. But juggling 6 teams, it's not all that realistic sometimes, but as best I can, I try to show up for them all.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it too. Like you kind of have to do, especially when you have that many teams, or you're trying to kind of get up to speed a little bit to understand exactly what sports are that maybe you're not as familiar with, or you've never even seen or like really played before, like squash or rowing. Like for example, like asking more questions, like kind of even touching base with people like the trainers that might have been with the team longer, have a little bit of a more of an understanding, or like what the coach's philosophy is and what like a collegiate season looks like. All those things are super helpful to kind of maybe get through some of those bumps in the road, like first year issues that might arise. That it's the same way when you were playing lacrosse in like high school, and like when you first started playing, like you kind of had to go through all those growing pains of like learning how to catch and like learning like how the rules are done. So it's hard when you have a team and like the expectation is put on you like right away to like get them ready for like the most important time, which is their season. But that's just kind of what happens. Like you just get thrown into a sport that you might not necessarily know as well. So you need to do a lot of stuff behind the scenes to make sure that you're doing them justice, and you're kind of doing your due diligence to make sure that the program is as well prepared as possible. And you'll develop more and more out of time. But I wanted to kind of touch on the thing that was like kind of the inverse of, we talked about like that D3 mentality. Like you touched on it, like, hey, I'd trade my whistle like for the jersey to play again. Like it's a hard thing as a coach, especially like being only a couple years like removed from playing, to like, hey, like take advantage of this. Like mine was taken away. Like it's either taken away or like I lost eligibility. I can't go back and play. So this is super important. Like, what do you do with some of those athletes that just like they just don't seem to want to be bought into it? Like they're kind of just going through the motions, or not really putting in the effort? Because like I've come to the point, and I know a lot of older coaches will get to the point where they're just like, listen, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. If a kid really doesn't want it, there's only so many times that I can beat my head against the wall to get this person to really want it? At the end of the day, if I want it more than them, it's a lost cause. So like,
Mhm.
what do you try to do to kind of maybe reach those players, or when is it like trying to get to a player? It's like, hey, this is too much. Like I have another 100 I have to worry about, and this one, if they don't want to be bought in, like I got another 99 that I could really focus my time and energy on.
Sure. I would say that just a few different things. I just try to talk to my athletes on an individual level when I notice something's off. Maybe I'm not connecting well to an athlete. Can I pull them aside, have a conversation? I think I'm pretty approachable. I'm not a yeller or a screamer, so I like to take that individual approach as best I can the first few times. I'll run out of patience sometimes, just constantly checking in on the same people. If, standards and expectations aren't being met, like I've stopped sessions before, I've kicked teams out, but I don't like to do that. So having conversations, but then on the flip side of that too, I'll use an example of an athlete I had once, and I just noticed they're so strong in certain lifts, but when it came to squatting, this athlete just did not want to squat, just wouldn't even try. Um, and I didn't know what the issue was. And I don't know if it came through one of the sport coaches, and they were like, hey, can so and so use the safety bar instead of front squat? And I was just like, yeah, that's fine. Is there any reason? And the second I made that change for this individual, the squat numbers skyrocketed. And I just don't think this athlete was comfortable with the front squat, didn't like the way it feels, was having issues with it. And on the flip side of it, I was just like, hey, you could have just asked me or talked to me or told me. I like to think that I'm very approachable for my athletes, but maybe it is kind of uncomfortable for them sometimes. So I think I try to take the individual approach and I go over the program. If you need anything, let me know. Modifications, anything's bothering you, tell me, we'll work through it. I'll always try to work through it. What's the closest we can get if we don't have to fully take it out? Um, but then in terms of athletes who you just try and try and try and try again, I think being a young coach, sometimes you look at yourself and you think, what is wrong with me? Why can I not get through to this person? But if it's just sometimes who that athlete or who that person is, chances are they're also having issues elsewhere in the training room with the sport coach. And I think the way that, that situation works itself out, well, they don't get much playing time, I'm sure, because they're not just an issue for me, hopefully. Oh, well, not hopefully, but they might not just be an issue for me. They might be an issue elsewhere. So I say that's kind of what I think is mainly my approach.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like oftentimes when you're to see athletes that maybe are kind of putting up a fight or having like some troubles, like there's a lot more like under that layers, and their chances are they're probably having some issues in different aspects of their life, whether it be school, like personal life, or like you said, same thing with playing time. It's the same as when we talk about like trying to apply stress like to an athlete, like by training and practice and things like that. Like stress is stress, no matter what it is. If it's going on in their personal life or with their schoolwork, it's going to affect them. And if they're coming in with a bad attitude, chances are it's not just only because of the weight room. Like that just might be the place where they truly show it or they just shut down. But there's probably something else going on, and being able to have those conversations, having like a little bit of rapport with each athlete definitely helps to kind of open them up and hopefully kind of change their mindset when it comes to what they're doing training wise. So no, that's a great point. So when you're kind of going through things now shifting kind of out of your playing days, and like now you and the rest of the staff are kind of doing a lot more powerlifting, how important was it for you to kind of like shift gears? I know like Coach Prendergast like kind of pushed you guys like, hey, let's do something competitive and still kind of take like that, those college playing days, and drive it into something else. And obviously like it drives into your coaching a little bit too. So why was it important for you to kind of like actually go on the platform versus just like, hey, I'll train and kind of set up a program for myself, or follow a specific program? Like why actually go on the platform and like get under the lights and get under the bar?
Hmm. So when I first got here to Hofstra, it was 2020, 2021, and I was very into lifting at this point. There was only so much I could do in my backyard during COVID. But when I got into this weight room, I remember the very first day that I lifted with Coach Prendergast, Coach Ashley Christie, and Coach Justin Bentavania. I called my mom on the way home and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like, it was just the atmosphere. They turned the lights off. They're blasting some crazy music and everyone's just cheering for each other. It was just one of the coolest things to really be a part of. And just that year, I wanted to learn as much as I could. I did the programs previously from my strength coach at TC&J. So that year, I tried 531 for the first time. It's like the strongest I had ever been to date. And I was trying triphasic and different types of programs. So it was really just a lot of learning and seeing what I liked, what worked, how it felt, before I would put it in programs for anyone else. But it was actually the following year when I worked at Fordham University. It was Coach Joe Gilfetter, my boss there, who encouraged me to compete in a powerlifting competition. You know, he knew that my strengths and what I was good at, and he was like, just do it. He does Muay Thai. Coach Giorgio over there does jujitsu. So they kept themselves in competitions and they were always training for something. And as much as I love to train, it's so cool to train for a certain goal. So whether that was a powerlifting competition or I had a certain number in my head for the next time I tested, that's how I first got into it. Had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I got to the competition in Philly, and in the beginning of it, they're just kind of going through the rules and everything. They mentioned that you need these high socks for deadlift. Had no idea. I sent my now fiance to wherever he could go in Philly to get me a pair of socks that would come above my knees for the deadlift, because I was just kind of lost. I was just doing it because I wanted to try it out. Learned a lot from that. And then the following year, when I got back here to Hofstra, DJ had done a strongman competition and wanted to try out powerlifting. So last year, we did one in the very beginning of May, kind of around this time. And I felt more knowledgeable going into it. Did a little bit better than I had previously, but it was just a cool experience. You know, we got to go and watch each other compete. Unfortunately, we didn't end up on the same day, but we trained together every single day. So then to, you know, really go and show up for each other was a cool experience.
No, that's cool too. And it's actually kind of nice that you guys were probably on different days, because I'm sure, can't remember if DJ mentioned it too. You probably got to be each other's handler and kind of be the coach for the day, which if you haven't been on like the flip side, like for powerlifting or for any other competition, powerlifting and Olympic lifting, especially because you can go in there and kind of jockey for positions and pick your attempts a little bit, and kind of understand like how much time you got before you're on stage to actually go lift. Like that's probably vastly different than like what your first competition was, because one, your gear bag was probably actually packed right this time. You had everything you needed, but then you could kind of sit in the back with headphones on, take your attempts kind of strategically while he's running around getting ready for your attempts. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes. However, very unfortunate for him. I was pretty fortunate. I was the day before him. He got to come and be my handler, but I don't remember what I had the following day, but I had some obligation that I could not go to his competition. So his girlfriend was sending me videos the entire time. I think someone who was there had remembered him from the day before, and they kind of just stepped up and offered to be his handler. So unfortunately, I wasn't actually there in person to watch him, but I was like glued to my phone waiting to get the updates. But yeah, it was a cool experience, definitely.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but it's nice. It kind of shows like some of the strength game community. It just people will step up and kind of help you. Like I've been in back rooms of competitions and guys are like sharing equipment for the most time, or at the Highland games and stuff, everybody brings their own beer. So it's nice to pass it around and just kind of hang out with the rest of the athletes and understand like pretty much when you go out there for all these competitions, it's really just you and the barbell or you and the weight. Everybody else that's there is really trying to compete for themselves, like and try to beat their own personal best. At the end of the day, you're scored against each other, but I would rather go out and have all PRs or do well and like be able to kind of showcase my training in a good light and see if it's actually working and come in dead last than actually like win and do terrible for my own standards and not really actually get to perform the way I wanted to from my training.
100%. I definitely, the first competition I did, like I said, I had no idea what I was doing. My starters were aggressive, my jumps were aggressive. I think I didn't even have a score in one or two of them. So it's it's a very strategic game in a way where you have to be confident. Like you want to put up a good number, but you also have to be very, very confident in that number that you're starting with. And then it's like, okay, well, what jump is sufficient, but also one that's going to help my score a little bit. I knew none of that going into it. So the second time around, I was much happier. I think I maybe missed two of my lifts, one my last, and then I think my deadlift, I missed my second attempt, but then came back and hit it my third one, something like that. But it was definitely a much better performance.
Like now that you've kind of got a couple competitions under your belt and like you're more removed from like actual like sports and like playing like for a team, have you noticed like the differences like in the mentality and the approach that you had to take? Because it's different when you're playing with a team and you have like teammates next to you and like you're a part of the play. You're not always the one with the ball. You're not always with the one like defending the person with the ball. And there's countless times within a game that you're actually going to be able to make a play where you kind of have to be really turned on. When you're
Mm,
going for a powerlifting meet, I mean, you got stuff that happens in the back room, but it's really just 9 attempts that you get to go out and like you have to attack the weight. And like you said, hopefully you don't have to really think about the strategy too much. You can just focus on confidence and go and perform your best like when the bar's in your hands. Like how different is it now that like, hey, I have to be focused on nine and I have to put all my emphasis on these nine versus like I'm just gonna play for 60 minutes and like when it's my time, like I'll be engaged and ready to go. It's a little different, isn't it?
definitely. But I I kind of like it that way, you know, there's nobody you could possibly point the finger at except for yourself. If I don't perform well, what did I do? Like, what did I do wrong? And I know personally my work ethic and what I do on a daily basis. And yeah, there's people there and it's really loud and you have spotters and you don't even know who they are. But at the end of the day, it's you and the barbell. And I just walk in there, I think now more confident in just the preparation that I put in. And, you know, I do this every day. So it's a cool feeling, I'd say. Kind of sucks if it doesn't really go your way, but there's no one else to blame except for me. What, like, why didn't that go the way I practiced or prepared, or was there something wrong with my preparation that I could have done better? And then especially in that setting, it's funny because I've done a few powerlifting competitions, but I by no means would consider myself a power lifter. I know in the background of one of the videos from my previous competition, like I just bench the same way that I always have. And I am like a close grip bencher. And there's someone in the back being like, oh my gosh, like what is that? What is that grip? Because everyone else is so wide, but that's where I'm comfortable. That's where I'm strong. And at the end of the day, I'm doing the competition for me. Is there a day I uh actually compete in it more like a power lifter or do my preparation a little bit differently? Maybe, but I kind of just have gone about it like I do training every single day.
Yeah, I think to your point too, like it just makes it more fun and it makes training even that more enjoyable when you actually have kind of a goal to set out. And it's different when you set out like to like sign up, like you pay for a competition, like you kind of plan ahead, like I'm gonna have to travel that day or I'm gonna have to take off or I'm gonna have to make kind of a weight cut because then you kind of dial in everything else around your life. It doesn't need to be like it's not paying the bills, you're not a professional athlete at it, but at the same time, like if you're putting it into discipline to like prepare and train, like there are all the other aspects that kind of surround it, if you're not letting it engulf your life, are still benefiting from it too. And I think there's a lot of benefit that comes from an individual sport. And then whether it be a strength sport or it be like wrestling or even gymnastics or swimming, whatever it ends up being, like where you're kind of solely responsible for your success or failures. Like you said, it's both self-gratifying and like self-defeating. And you really have to go back and reflect on, okay, well, was it a bad performance or are my results like indicative of the preparation and the training that I put forth to get me here? Or did I do something wrong when it actually came to game day and like meet day? Was that what it was? Or was it really just everything leading up to it? And you really have to like sit there and be self-critical in those moments. And you can't necessarily do that to the highest degree when it comes to a team sport because there's too many factors that kind of come into play, whether or not you're successful in a specific moment or not. It's just not as kind of clean cut and dry as it would be for an individual sport.
And I honestly think that it's part of the reason why I got into strength and conditioning. Like everyone I know or who knew me as an athlete, I always say, I feel like I was a decent athlete. I was a fairly good athlete, played for a good program. I do not show up in the stats. I'm not by any means a stat player. I was a 3-year starter, but you wouldn't be able to tell that from the stat book. So the coolest thing to me about the weight room was as an athlete, I was the person who was hustling like all the way up and down the field all the time, pushing people, my teammates, kind of as a defender, I might not be the one getting the cause turnover, but was I in the right spot? Did I help, my teammate get into that position, whatever it was? But when it came to the weight room, that was the first place that I ever saw a stat for how hard I was working. And I saw that continually improve and I loved it. I loved that feeling. And, I max out or test myself here and there, and I keep track of all my maxes and my progress. But, powerlifting was cool because it doesn't just count for me. Like other people get to see that too. And it's actually documented, recorded somewhere in that work I put in. It's really just a true self-evaluation and a way for me to see that hopefully pay off.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, especially with some sports or certain positions on sports, like defense is always kind of one of them too. Like there are definitely stats, but the majority of like American sports are just like worldwide sports, like attacking and like offense is like where you're going to get the most of like your statistics. And that's kind of like we already know, like for those sports, like those are kind of your glory positions and defense. And then like some like in the trenches kind of positions, you don't really get to see like who is a successful person necessarily. Like just to like the layman like person that's actually watching sports, versus the people that actually have been involved in it and know what's going on. And like to your point, like the what you're doing in the weight room and all those things, that's kind of the first time you really get to track progress and see like, hey, what I'm doing in here like actually has a benefit to the field. And even though you can't really like quantify it on the field by statistics or like, I mean, even if you're a starting defender, a lot of times you're going to play 60 minutes. You're not really getting subbed off. So like you can't say playing time. You can't say a lot of things like that. Maybe you have two cause turnovers. You have one, two, one, two, one. You can't really justify like, hey, I'm doing well. But if you're looking at all the other aspects like the weight room and stuff, like now you can start to see like athleticism and strength levels start to build up. So that's cool. When you actually went to school too, like was was strength conditioning, coaching like at all like kind of on your radar? Was that like in the cards, or like how did that start to develop? Because you said like getting there, like finding the weight room, kind of finding that passion, and that did it shift like why, like what was your education and like your bachelor's degree?
So my bachelor's degree was in health and exercise science. When I first decided to play lacrosse at TCNJ, I was kind of in the mindset of I don't really know exactly what I want to do. I think at the time I wanted to go into speech pathology because my mom was like, "Oh, it's a great job. It pays well." And I was like, "That's cool. I like talking to people." But then as soon as I kind of started lifting and learning a little bit about nutrition and stuff on my own, before I even went to school, I had asked to change my major to health and exercise science. And my intention going in was to go the nutrition route and be a dietitian. Took Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2, got to the time I was probably going to have to take organic chemistry. And I realized just I hated it. It was, I had to put so much effort in to memorize all of these things. And I just figured it wasn't the route for me. So then it was a little up in the air. I thought maybe physical therapy because everyone in exercise science wanted to go into the PT OT space. I tried out a summer where I was an aide at a physical therapy um, office nearby. And I think physical therapy is great. It just was not, it wasn't me. I think it was a little slow paced for what I wanted and what I was looking for. And then I just one day, I was like, oh my gosh, it's right in front of me. I love the weight room and I can do this for a living. So I started asking my coach some more questions. And by the time my senior year internship came around, funny story there too was usually you take your internship the spring of your senior year, but because I played lacrosse in the spring, I had gone and asked if I could do it in the fall. And thank goodness I did because I never would have finished that internship had it been in the spring because of COVID and school ending. So I did my internship at the Lawrenceville School. It's a boarding high school in New Jersey. And I loved it. It was my first transition from athlete to coach. And I think the setting was perfect. I like to think of it as how I learned my fundamentals of coaching because a lot of those high school athletes have zero weight room experience. So I was taking someone who has never done any of these movements before and learning how to cue them, which I think ultimately just helps in any setting, but absolutely helped me later on when I transitioned to the collegiate setting, just getting a lot of coaching reps and practice with that age group.
Yeah, that's super lucky that like that actually happened. You were able to do the internship at that time. I know
Mm.
enough, I know enough athletes that are spring sports and they try to do that internship during that time, whether it be forced or just like kind of forgetting at that point in time. It's a nightmare. And yeah, I remember that COVID year because we were one of the last we were the one of the last teams to play, and we had a makeshift, like we were playing Yale when I was at Fresno State, and we ended up making it a double senior day. And we were like, I think one of two games going on in the country that they let us finish. And it was like the
Wow.
last lacrosse games of that time. And I was like, this is really happening. This is going to close down the season. So it's a good thing you got to do the internship, and it's unfortunate like what happened like that senior year, but it kind of worked out at least career wise after that. And I think you did it a good way. Like everybody's career path's a little bit different, how they kind of get into coaching and like the trajectory that kind of takes them or what their goals end up looking like, because you found a way to kind of like before you got to it, like dip your toe in the water of like a few ways that you could tree branch out. It's like, oh, do I want to do speech pathology, which is a little bit different, but nutrition, physical therapy, like you could have even gone high school after getting that experience in it. Like what ultimately kind of drew you to the collegiate side versus like all these other different spokes, because there's private sector, there's professional, there's all these other things. And like what kind of keeps you involved and like around Hofstra? Because now talking to everybody in Long Island area, everybody like and as yeah, Hofstra's on Long Island, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah, everybody seems to just like, hey, I'm staying right here, like in this place. Like this is where my feet are. This is where I'm staying for a long time. Like what makes it so appealing, and like why was college like the right avenue for you?
Um, Honestly, I ended up at Hofstra because I was talking to the coaches at the high school internship that I did. And to my understanding, I just needed my CSCS and then I was good to be a strength coach. Like I was qualified after that. So I thought bachelor's degree, CSCS, done. And when I actually sat down and talked to them, they were just saying that it's not necessarily a requirement right now, but the way the field is going, you should get a master's degree. You should get a master's degree, but absolutely keep your hand in coaching. Try to be a graduate assistant somewhere if you can. That way, you could probably get some school paid for and you keep your hands-on experience. So I'm so glad that they told me to do so. I applied to two schools. I applied to Hofstra and Springfield, and ultimately I got into both, but Hofstra financially for me, I'm from Long Island. It was the best decision at the time. They were also offering me the opportunity to be a grad assistant right off the bat, which was awesome. I was prepping for my CSCS and planned to get it prior to coming here. And I just knew there was a coach on staff here who was a qualified CSCCA mentor. And in my mind, I wasn't 100% sure what setting I wanted to go into, whether it was high school, private, collegiate. But I knew that if there was a lot of weight on that CSCCA certification, I didn't want to rule that option out. So I wanted to come here, take that exam so that if I did ultimately love and decide to go the collegiate route, I could really go any route that I wanted at that point. So, yeah, I came here and I don't know if it's just because I was so used to that environment, because I was so fresh out of my experience, but I loved it. I just feel like there's nothing like the team culture in the collegiate setting. In high school, you're a two-sport athlete, a three-sport athlete, but when you're in college, your team is your family and it's a year-round thing. It's not just for the spring or the fall. It's year round. We're in this together. And I just think there's nothing like the culture in the college setting. And I just loved it.
Yeah, it's definitely different than some of those other settings too. And you could certainly find like that kind of community and the culture. It's just going to be a little bit different. And then
Mm.
even like in some of the other divisions, it's a little different how much you're actually around your team, like whether your team kind of gets together or whether you're kind of voluntold to hang out together. But that's what makes every sport, what makes every team, and what every year is unique is the people that kind of comprise that team, and being involved in like really special ones. It is a lot of fun to be around, especially like when everybody wants to be competitive, everybody wants the best, and everybody is actually working on their preparation to move forward. So no, it's definitely what's kept me in college, and what kind of drives, I think, a lot of people that are in it to stay in collegiate sports, because of that atmosphere and how fun it is to kind of prepare them, and then obviously like watch them play on game day. it's a cool thing, especially when you've experienced yourself and you kind of you remember what it's like and you kind of get itchy on the sideline to like, oh man, I wish I could play. Even if it's like a sport you've never played, you're like, man, it looks fun when they do it. I could never do that.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like too with the high school setting, not that I fully ruled it out, but I think I had a unique experience because I was at a boarding school and, maybe just a public high school or just a regular private school, maybe their schedule is a bit different, but at a boarding school, they have the teams that come in, but they also have different roles on campus. They might live on campus and be in charge of a dorm, or they teach classes. They have a general senior class that comes in. So there were a lot of additional responsibilities I knew of in that role that at that point it just wasn't the route I wanted to go. Not to say there's not additional responsibilities now for me in the collegiate setting, but I think at the time it wasn't exactly the route that I wanted to go. I wanted to coach.
Yeah, that's unique too. I don't know if a lot of people have been in high school settings that are in the college side, but to be a kind of on the boarding school side and have them kind of living on campus, it's at that age and then kind of you're almost getting the college experience in a sense, but they're high school. It's I can't imagine what that's like, but
Right.
it might have been a good precursor for college and kind of what you were gonna inevitably get into.
Sure. Like up to that point, before I went there, I was like, boarding schools are real? I thought that was just, parents say I'm going to ship you off to boarding school. Like I didn't know they actually existed. So it was definitely an interesting experience, learned a lot about it, but didn't want
Definitely
to go
different.
that
Yeah,
route.
definitely different. Hey, so if you're kind of looking back on like how your career started, like when you first got into the collegiate side, like actually transitioning into your first full-time role, like what was maybe like the biggest difference that you weren't maybe necessarily prepared for or didn't expect as like a responsibility that going from a GA, going from an intern that was now on your plate as an assistant. And it might be just, hey, and now I have six teams I'm in charge of. I'm talking to different coaches, but was there anything that was like super unique or like, man, I wish I would have done a little bit more to prepare for this before I kind of like was in the seat and as a full time.
I think one of the biggest things and the transitions is as an intern and as a GA, you're still really going through the strength coaching staff. So all the programs that I'm writing, I'm sitting down with them. I might be getting it approved by them. I wasn't very involved in meetings with sport coaches or athletic trainers and things like that. So I think that was definitely a big adjustment just from a daily schedule perspective. Up to that point, it was really I was on the floor when I was on the floor and I was in the office picking, the coach's brain in between, but I wasn't really seeing all the in between that happened, whether it was the meetings with all the different sport coaches, athletic trainers, or um even what was I gonna say? Like recruit talks, trying to get a recruit here. You just found out that this recruit just came from a Power Five school. What am I going to say about my program? How am I going to, help sell our program here? So I think those are just some different responsibilities or parts of the job that maybe I didn't have as much practice with that you learn it once you first start doing it. And then I'd say like a little bit later on, I started asking for more responsibilities now. So I wanted to come back to Hofstra and run our internship program. And we also have the opportunity to be adjunct professors in our exercise science department. So I'm able to teach a little bit. So I think those are some of the additional responsibilities that I didn't really know of at the time or didn't really have at the time.
Yeah, those are definitely some adjustments that like aren't recruiting and like having those conversations, kind of those soft skills where you're meeting with athletic trainers, SIDs, like different other members of support staff and like the coaching staff, or like hey, what my job is at practice. These are all things that you kind of have to experience and then ask people and kind of observe and figure out like where am I needed? Where can I kind of fill in the gaps? Where can I like show my expertise? Where can I be of a benefit? And it's on the job training for the most part. And that's why, like, as GAs or volunteers or interns, it's like your job to kind of see and get a feel for what the full-time staff is doing. It might not necessarily be the same copy and paste every school or every program. It might not be what like the sport coach specifically wants, but it's nice to have an understanding of like, hey, my job could consist of this because they want me to do this. And yeah, it kind of falls within my lines. Like, how can I be prepared for this better? So now, like being like the internship coordinator and working with some of those interns, like you went through the experience yourself, and like now you kind of see all the things, and like you mentioned some of the stuff that not necessarily in a book, maybe not part of the CSCCA's like mentorship curriculum. How do you kind of get them a little bit more adjusted so maybe when they get their first full-time job, they're just a little bit more prepared than you were when you got yours?
Mm-hmm. So our internship curriculum was at its base what I went through as an intern here. And since then, we've tried to expand, maybe update some things. We love to have them listen to podcasts and videos. I tried to make our meetings. We used to have one meeting a week, and then we started doing two meetings a week. One is intended to be very, very hands-on in the weight room. I think one thing I noticed with some of the interns that was different, at least for me personally, was when I was here, this was my job. I didn't have another job outside of this. So I was very, very available, which was great because I got a lot of experience with the teams. But I definitely noticed that some of our interns have jobs outside of here, and we have to work around their schedules a little bit more, which is awesome. I know student loans are no fun, but I felt like I trained every single day with the staff. So something that was missing for me a little more recently was, are the interns practicing what we're teaching them? If they haven't done the Olympic lifts before, if they're not very familiar with plyometrics, are they doing it? Are they training with us? Are they training at all in our facility? So ultimately, what we did was we have a hands-on meeting once a week. So whatever the topic is, we'll either put them through demonstrations of exercises. They might demo things to us. They may write a warm-up program and actually coach us through that. And for us, that's kind of the first way we can get a glimpse into how they would coach or interact with our team. So if you can run a good warm-up and bring the four of us coaches through that, then we're probably progressing to the point where I want to get you up in front of our team. So I think that has been one thing that has been great for us. So we have a lot of discussions at the end of the week. That's when their weekly assignments are due. Our syllabus is 15 weeks. They have an assignment due pretty much every week. So there's a lot of demos, a lot of hands-on, and then a little later on, we get into the programming and annual plan and things like that. Other than that, I would say our interview, we just wrapped up our mock interviews with our interns as well. One thing that I did when I did my mock interview was cover letter, resume. But when I actually stepped in and tried getting my first job in the field, I started realizing, oh, wait, everyone's making a full-blown portfolio. This is way more than just a cover letter and a resume. There's a cover page, a cover letter, a resume, your references, sample, training plans, an annual plan, coaching philosophies, training philosophies. And I was like, I've never seen this before. So that's something that I have integrated into our program as well. We're pretty much building up to it throughout the entire internship because they do a 12-week programming assignment. They do an annual plan draft. They write coaching and training philosophies, but then it's putting all of it together and then going through a mock interview, which I know is a lot of work for them, but I am just hopeful that when they actually step into the field or go to apply for a job, they feel well prepared for that. Because I know that was something for me that was definitely an adjustment, but something I've used ever since.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, like of an internship too, I think, is to be so over prepared that like when you get to a full-time role, like all the traits that you like would kind of know would be inherent for like a strength coach position, you at least have like a little bit of knowledge, or you've either done it before or you've seen another coach do it. If you might not have been the one like kind of pulling the strings or leading the meeting, or the one like ultimately like dictating what the program was going to be and running the sessions for every single thing, but you have at least experienced it, like been an assistant for those things, or talked through it and kind of done some of these mock projects where you're as close to the real thing as you possibly could be. But I mean, you're right too. Like some of the interns that we're seeing are coming in and they're like, well, I can only work these hours. Like, we don't even have teams at those hours. Like, well, should I even come in? I was like, I don't give a shit. Whatever. If you don't want to come in, that's fine. That's up to you. I'm not, it's the same with some of the athletes that are like, well, I don't really want to do stuff. Be like, all right, I got another 100 I can worry about. Like, you're just going to kind of drop off, and I'll work with you as much as possible. But especially the interns, like I did 5 internships and I was there as much as possible trying to beat coaches there. If I did work another job, I would try to do it on the off days or off hours so that I could be there consistently all the time, lift, train, and kind of just be around them. Even if the coaches weren't saying anything, I just wanted to like kind of osmosis, like suck some knowledge from them as much as possible. And now it's like a conveniency thing. I get it, student loans, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like if this is what you really want to do, you working at Taco Bell or working at some sort of convenience store is maybe paying your gas money and paying for a little bit of food. It's not putting a dent in student loans.
Right.
So if you want a full-time job in coaching, you better be there as much as possible, and then sacrifice your nights, sacrifice some early mornings, sacrifice your weekends or whenever like you're not there, or have a conversation with your internship coordinator and the staff and be like, listen, I want to be here as much as possible. I do have bills. Let me do this, not pop in for 2 hours or one team and leave. Like you're only going to get out of it what you put in. If you miss an internship meeting with me, we're not doing makeup time. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to like be there and like actually be involved, because I know you're aware of this too. Like when you were in probably starting off, most of like the real knowledge and stuff that's not going to come in like a formal meeting and setting, you're going to get on the floor when like the full-time coaches are training or they're coaching or they're actually doing their jobs, not when they're sitting down trying to program and answer emails and eat lunch and make phone calls and stuff. Like that's usually not the time, especially if everybody on staff has 6+ teams. It's not the time or place. Like get out of the office, like go do your studying while I do like the office work that actually is a part of a strength coach job. Like that's why we have the stuff set aside.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I started presenting once again, Coach Gilfetter's idea. He's like, get outside your comfort zone. You should start presenting. But um, I had 1 year of full-time experience. I had nothing as far as, data and this is what works, this is what doesn't work. I had nothing like that to talk about. So I thought to myself, what can I possibly speak on? And essentially what I came up with is, oh, well, here's everything I learned in the past 2 years that I did not get from a textbook or my degree. And like you said, it's all of those things that you only learn through experience. And it's actually funny, two weeks ago when I was at TCNJ, I gave that presentation at TCNJ, and it's titled "What My Degrees Didn't Teach Me About Being a Strength and Conditioning Coach." So I threw in a disclaimer saying, I'm not saying don't go to school here. You're being well prepared, but this is very much a job where your degrees and your certifications are bare minimum. That just shows that we have the knowledge and the understanding of what we're putting down on the piece of paper. But if we actually want that program that we put down on paper to work, there's so much more that goes into it. And you only learn that through experience. Like, one of my favorite things that I bring up in that presentation that I like to joke about, but the first time you hear an intern use a whistle, like, it is so concerning because it's one of those things that you don't think you have to practice, but I've heard some really bad whistles before. So it's just little things like that that matter so much that you don't realize how much they really do until you get to experience it.
Yeah, experience and kind of failure is the best teacher. So until you kind of go out there and actually go through the motions yourself and do it in front of an audience, put yourself in an uncomfortable position, like it's not practical yet. You have to find a way to apply it, and you have to find a way to actually get in front of those teams and see what you're actually going to do when push comes to shove. So that's a great point. Hey, so like any good training session, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and good old fashioned overtime at the end. So you can go rapid fire, or if there's a couple that you need to expand on a little bit more, feel free to. But you ready?
Yes. All
All
right.
right. First one I got for you, biggest influence in the strength and conditioning field and biggest influence now in strength sports.
Mm. Uh, so biggest influence, absolutely Coach Jimmy Prendergast from Hofstra. The biggest lesson I've ever taken from him that I love to share is just you're never ready for your next step. And that's something that I always carry with me wherever I go, and always keep that in mind when a new opportunity or something comes about. You're never going to feel 100% ready for it. As far as strength sports, to be honest, I'm very much not in tune with competitive athletes in the strength sports. I'd say one strength coach who she is a crazy lifter, so inspiring, is Kenna at Army. She is strong as hell, and I hope to be as strong as her one day.
She's a beast. That's that I wanted to figure out because like even though you're in powerlifting, you said you don't consider yourself a powerlifter. So I was wondering, I was like, all right, well, who actually like does Lilly actually kind of follow that actually is in kind of the strength game? So not Ken is a great one for sure. Hey, so when you're not coaching, you're not competing, like you're kind of outside the weight room walls, what are some of your go-to hobbies to like recharge or kind of reinvigorate yourself?
I don't know if this counts, but I'm a huge country music person. So I don't know if it's a hobby of mine, but whenever I possibly can get to some sort of country concert, like, I am there. So I've been to a bunch, hope to continue to go, but I just enjoy country music.
So the conference was a good hit then.
Oh, that was awesome. Like, ideal setting. There was country music everywhere.
Wait, hopefully it'll be back in Nashville, not Indiana again. Well, we'll see how Indiana goes, but there's not going to be country there for sure.
Yeah, I'm actually in Nashville this week for
Oh,
one
there
of
you go.
my friend's bachelorettes, so I'm excited to get out there.
You'll get some good music for sure. Hey, so we talked about a little bit before, like all the different paths you might have gone, but if you weren't coaching, what do you think you would be doing right now? Maybe if it's not one of those ones, if there was something different in the cards, like what do you think you would be doing instead?
To be honest, if I wasn't in the world of strength and conditioning, I totally could have seen myself going into the world of coaching lacrosse. I think that that's something I could have done. And if not, I probably would have gone down, I don't know if it was the speech pathology route, but I love interacting with people. So whether that's, I don't know, some sort of counselor, academic advisor, maybe something like that.
Okay. Hey, so if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself, like you beat everybody else in the Hofstra weight room, so you get to pick the music. You probably already answered it, like what's going to be playing, but it might be different when you're training. What's playing through the speakers? And then when the lift is done, what is your favorite post-training meal?
So DJ and I don't know how I got on this route. We love alternative in the weight room. That's a go-to for us. But also, I don't even know if this is the proper way to describe it, but just like crazy screaming music will be playing, like screamo music will be playing in the weight room sometimes. And my go-to PR song is Zombie, but it's like the Bad Wolves version, I think. Don't know where that came from. Love it, but it's my go-to. Post-workout meal, I'm any cut of steak. I am just love steak.
Okay. All right. So last one I got for you for overtime. What is your favorite part of coaching? And then what is your favorite part of competing now as like in powerlifting?
My favorite part of coaching is definitely just the impact that I hopefully get to make every day. I was very fortunate to have coaches that impacted my life so much so that I wanted to go down this route. So I just hope that I can have the same influence on my athletes. And my favorite part of competing is I'm just a very competitive person. So just really the environment to be able to train with others and support each other. But also, I like to see my own progress and really track that and, hold myself accountable because I feel like my life would be pretty boring without it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like holding yourself accountable. I think it's the one it translates over to coaching because if you can't do it, it's a lot harder for you to ask athletes to do it. And you can't trust a skinny chef. So you got to make sure that you're doing a little bit of the stuff that you're kind of preaching to them that is important. And it's a lot more fun. Like we said, we've talked about a couple times to actually be training for something that's meaningful to you and that has a goal and kind of a timeline in mind. And yeah, making an impact with athletes and kind of seeing the progress that they make over the course of 1, 2, 3, or a whole career is pretty cool. And then I'm sure once you get into it a little bit longer and you start seeing them maybe come back to Long Island and like see progress that they've made after they're playing, it's pretty special too, because there's a lot more going on than just sports. So that's awesome. Hey, so for anybody that's got any questions for you, maybe want to follow along when you guys gear up for your next powerlifting competition, whenever that pops around, how can they reach out to you for questions or kind of follow along?
So my Instagram is probably the best way to follow along. It's Lilly_Bernardi1. Lilly with a total of 3 L's, but 2 in the middle. And then my email is on the Hofstra website, but it's lily.a.bernardi@hofstra.edu.
Perfect. Well, we'll link everything in there so they can put the L's in the right places and make sure that they reach out to the right person. So, hey, Coach, I appreciate you coming on today and had a good time chatting here at the conference. So thanks for sharing some info with the rest of our audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.